Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvadikacharya To Tarasato Shri Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Samveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Anmilitam Yena Tasmat Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Yuta Pada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Bitam Tam Sujivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Napta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Eshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. All right, so I guess we're ready to start.
Yes, Maharaj. So let me introduce. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome you all to the virtual Sunday Feast lecture on this auspicious Purushottam month at ISKCON, New York, Brooklyn. We are very fortunate to have the association of His Holiness Chandrasekhara Maharaj. And Maharaj would be giving a lecture on the topic, What Good is the Mode of Goodness? A brief introduction. Chandrasekhara Maharaj lives in Brooklyn, New York. He is active in current programs at the Brooklyn, Queens, as well as invitations to occasional program presentations in Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, Long Island, Connecticut, Philadelphia, and New Jersey. He joined Krishna conscious movement while living in San Francisco, California in the year 1975 and was initiated into the Brahma Madhava Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya by his divine gaze, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada in 1976. Ever since, His Holiness Chandrasekhara Swami Maharaj has been engaged in educating the masses about Krishna consciousness and explaining the Vedic knowledge from the point of view of Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So let's hear from Maharaj on this topic. So the class will probably go till 8:20, and after that, if you have some questions, please raise your hand. I'll unmute you and you can ask your questions. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
All right, Hare Krishna. So I chose this topic. Actually, Matuna suggested it, and I decided it was a good topic. And I came up with the title, "What Good is the Mode of Goodness?" We've all heard about the mode of goodness, but what exactly is it? It's an interesting subject, and that's why I chose to talk about it a little bit because it's interesting that in no other religion or spiritual path in the world do we really get much discussion about the mode of goodness except from the Vedas. And of course, it exists in Buddhism a little bit, but the Buddhists got it from from the Vedas. So these modes are something that are really exclusive to the Vedic knowledge. There's no mention of anything even remotely like this in any other religious text, as far as I'm aware. So let's talk about these modes, and particularly we'll talk about the mode of goodness. So here is the verse I wanted to focus on, which is in the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verse 6. Tatra sattvam nirmalat vat pradarshakam anamayam sukha sangena badnati jnana sangena chanagaha tatra sattvam nirmalat vat prakashakam anamayam sukha sangena badnati jnana sangena chanagaha. So this verse translates, O sinless one, the mode of goodness, being purer than the others, is illuminating. It frees one from all sinful reactions. Those situated in that mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. So I'll read the purport. It's not a long one. The living entity is conditioned by the material nature of various types. One is happy, another active, another helpless. All these types of psychological manifestations are causes of the entity's conditional status and nature. How they are differently conditioned is explained in this section of Bhagavad Gita. The mode of goodness is first considered. The effect of developing the mode of goodness in the material world is that one becomes wiser than those otherwise conditioned. A man in the mode of goodness is not so much affected by material miseries, and he has a sense of advancement in material knowledge. The representative type is the Brahmana, who is supposed to be situated in the mode of goodness. This sense of happiness, this sense of this sense of happiness is due to understanding that in the mode of goodness, one is more or less free from sinful reactions. Actually, in the Vedic literature, it is said the mode of goodness means greater knowledge and a greater sense of happiness. The difficulty here is that when a living entity is situated in the mode of goodness, he becomes conditioned to feel that he is advanced in knowledge and better than others. In this way, he becomes conditioned. The best examples are the scientists and the philosophers. Each is very proud of his knowledge, and because they generally improve their living conditions, they feel a sort of material happiness. This sense of advanced happiness in conditioned life makes them bound by the mode of goodness and material nature. As such, they are attracted toward working in the mode of goodness. And as long as they have an attraction for working in that way, they have to take some type of body in the modes of nature. There is no likelihood of liberation. Thus, there's no likelihood of liberation or being transferred to the spiritual world. Repeatedly, one may become a philosopher, a scientist, or a poet, but repeatedly become entangled in the same disadvantages of birth and death. But due to the illusion of material energy, one thinks that that sort of life is pleasant. So, tatra sattvam nirmalat vat prakasham anamayam prakashakam anamayam sukha sangena bhatnati jnana sangena chanagaha. O sinless one, the mode of goodness, being purer than the others, is illuminating, and it frees one from all sinful reactions. Those situated in that mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. Then the mode of goodness is described in a number of different ways in the Vedas, and also the modes themselves are described in a number of different ways in the Vedic literature. Probably where I want to start here, probably the best way to start, is the experience of the mode of goodness. I think probably all of us have had this experience of suddenly being in nature. And when, especially us city dwellers who spend, day after day in a city, we have a building going up next door, and people are banging and clanging on things all day long. And at night, people are screaming about things. I don't know what they're screaming about, but they're screaming about things at night. So um, uh, this is the nature of the city. But when you go in nature, we find that the mind immediately kind of goes, ooh, gets very peaceful. The mind feels very kind of relaxed. Um, this happens. I always notice that whenever after, I spend most of my time here in New York City, and sometimes I go to New Vrindavan or somewhere like that, and we get in a car. And the minute we get over into Jersey and kind of past urban Jersey, and we're starting to see grass and trees on both sides of the highway mostly, then the mind kind of does kind of, oh, I feel so peaceful now. And this is the mode of goodness whacking us in the face. Of course, the mode of goodness is a good thing to be actually enveloped by. The forest or the natural countryside is a place where essentially the Supreme Lord is creating the entire environment. And for the most part, the intrusion of human beings is minimal. Whereas the other way around, when you're in the city, there's almost no vision of anything natural. Everything that we see is a brick or a street or a fire hydrant or a pile of trash or something like that. So these are the normal sights that we see in the city. The thing that I want to point out here with this first look at the mode of goodness is that it's an experience. It's coming to us from outside. We can understand that the modes are internal and they are external. We have an internal version of the modes, and there's an external version of the modes. Sometimes the internal version of the modes, it synchronizes with the external version. So, as we're going to see in a minute, there are three modes: goodness, passion, ignorance. And just like the weather, the external mode is like the weather, it changes. Right now, it may be the mode of goodness. Later on, it'll be the mode of passion. And after that, again, it'll be the mode of ignorance and then goodness. So the Bhagavad Gita, we start off with the 14th chapter where these three modes are described. And we learn that the modes are competing, that sometimes one is dominant and the other two are suppressed, and sometimes the other one is dominant and therefore the opposite of that one, the other two, they are suppressed. So when one mode dominates, the other two are suppressed. And just like the weather, so sometimes it's rainy, sometimes it's dry, sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold, sometimes it's windy, and so on. The external world brings us into contact with an external experience, and that may be the mode of goodness, it may be the mode of passion, it may be the mode of ignorance. If we are in a setting like, for instance, the external world of nature, this is the mode of goodness. And even if internally we have something going on in the mode of passion or the mode of ignorance, this will tend to move us in the direction of the mode of goodness because the external affects the internal mode that we are experiencing. It takes a very strong and controlled person to be able to more or less ignore the external mode if it's unfavorable. One thing we will also notice is that people themselves on the inside tend to be predominantly in the mode of goodness or in the mode of passion or in the mode of ignorance. Hardly anyone can be found who is exclusively in the mode of goodness, exclusively in the mode of passion, or exclusively in the mode of ignorance. We're in some admixture, and in some ways we're in the mode of ignorance, in some ways we're in the mode of goodness, in other ways we're in the mode of passion. So we're a mixture. But if you take an overall average of what kind of mode we're acting in, that's why we say someone is more in the mode of ignorance or passion or more mode of goodness, because the average of all their different qualities in the various modes comes out that mostly they're in the mode of passion or ignorance or goodness. A person in the mode of goodness will be comfortable in an environment in the mode of goodness. A person in the mode of passion will be comfortable in an environment in the mode of passion. And a person in the mode of ignorance will be quite comfortable in a place that's in the mode of ignorance. So that's why when people who are very passionate or people who are very ignorant are put in a mode of goodness environment like the forest or something like that, they find it uncomfortable. They don't like being there very much. And even most of us who are in the somewhat in the mode of goodness. If we go into the forest, we get bored after a while because we are not truly in the mode of goodness. We are somewhat in the mode of goodness. And the reason we're bored is because we want passionate activity. We want to do something, generally speaking. So we don't feel so at home in the mode of goodness. Now, the next point that I want to make is if we could really go even further than just oming out in the forest, if we could go further and we could do meditation, we could get deeper into the mode of goodness. And almost nobody can really do this. Certainly, people try doing it. So, what if we could meditate properly? The mind is like the switchboard of experience. And this is basically how the yoga system works. We are engaged in the mode of goodness by, first of all, we have to do hatha yoga, which means that we can sit comfortably in a lotus position for some length of time. And then we can control the breathing. And then by controlling the breathing, we can gradually make the mind more and more and more peaceful, where the mind is very relaxed and the mind is not thinking about any specific thing, nor are we bored, nor are we afraid, nor are we uncomfortable. We just feel a kind of buoyancy, and we're not thinking about any particular thing. So, in such a consciousness, we don't feel stress, we don't feel a tendency to do something. And this is kind of what the yoga system is all about. Since we have just said that the mind is a switchboard experience, the senses, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the ears, they're bringing input into the mind. And then the mind digests this input, and the self experiences it. Because then that the mind is the switchboard, everything has to come through it. By controlling the mind, by slowing down the mind, we can drastically change our experience of the external world. And people try to do this, and it is possible to do it through the yoga system and through breathing. But most people will find that either they can't sit still long enough, it's too painful or too awkward, or when they do, their brain is still racing around, so it won't go into any kind of meditational trance whatsoever. Or they'll find that it just seems like an overall waste of time for them. They just can't get anywhere with the system. And this again is clear indication of the kind of mode that a person is operating in. A person in one mode will find the attempt to meditate kind of interesting and will be quite comfortable trying to do it. Whereas another person will feel it's an awkward thing and that they are finding absolutely no benefit from it whatsoever. They can't get any kind of experience. And yet another person is so far removed from it that wouldn't even bother to try. So the modes, as we say, can be internal or external. And one of the purposes of meditation was to basically actually turn the entire consciousness from the external to the internal. We go to a protected place, we sit, we're alone, we're not next to a phone, we're not thinking about what we're going to be doing in a few hours. We're there in the moment, and the moment may be a long moment, and we are leaving the external world that we spend so much time in. And we're entering that unusual and mysterious internal world that most never go to at any time. The internal environment is something we have with us at all times, yet many people never go there. Many people never explore the internal world for one reason or another, usually because they haven't the uh, inclination to go there. There's more important things, better things, more attractive things to do, so they never want to go there. And in our modern world, it is possible to even live your entire life without even once experiencing the inner world. It's possible to do that, and I think a lot of people do. Uh, this idea of the modes is important to understand, because if we can gradually bring ourselves more fully to what's called the mode of goodness, then spiritual life becomes much, much more easy to pursue. Some of you know, but maybe some of you don't know so well. These are our three modes. They're goodness, which is like the mode of balance, the mode of passion, which is the mode of competition, and ignorance, which is the mode of failure. So Prabhupada, in that purport that I just read, characterized the mode of goodness as happy. He characterized the mode of passion as active, and he characterized the mode of ignorance as helpless. That was the word he used, helpless. Now, here we have the demigods in charge of these modes. On the far left in this little picture, halfway cut off, is the painting of Lord Brahma sitting on his lotus flower. In the middle, we have Lord Vishnu. And on the right, we have Mahesh, or Shiva. Brahma, on the left, is the master, or guna avatar, of the mode of passion. In the center, Vishnu is the master, or the guna avatar, of the mode of goodness. And on the right, Shiva is the demigod, or the master, in charge of the mode of ignorance. All three of these have to be there. All three of these are constantly interacting with one another. And all three of these have a constant effect on our lives and on our thinking. Gosh, I just can't get my throat clear. Have a constant effect on our thinking. They, like a wind pushing a boat on the water, these modes push our lives and our consciousness in different directions. We're going to examine what exactly these modes are here. Again, we have goodness, passion, ignorance. They are described in the Vedas as elements. We learned that when the material nature is created, we have the white light, or the Brahm Jyoti, and it transforms by mixing with Maya into something called the pradhan. And then later on, the pradhan is destabilized. And when the pradhan is destabilized, it's no longer white, it's no longer homogeneous. Now it begins to have uh, different characteristics in different places. It begins changing, and it becomes goodness, passion, ignorance. So the very um, substance of the matter that we live in, the matter that we deal with, is comprised of these three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Now, these three, they become integrated with each of the three subtle elements, which are mind, intelligence, and ego, and they begin to produce different things. So particularly the mode of, the false ego merges with the mode of goodness and produces certain things, demigods. The mode of passion merges with the false ego and produces the senses, sense objects, the subtle sense objects, and the senses. And the mode of ignorance mixes with the false ego and produces the gross elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So from these very ethereal and abstract things, the tangible everyday world that we touch, feel, smell, hear, and see becomes available to us. We start off with these very, very abstract things that are not very perceptible to our senses at all, in fact, almost not at all. And they mix together, and gradually we start seeing the material senses, we start seeing all these other things. So now, since the modes are the elements themselves, they begin to sift things out. So in Bhagavad Gita, we find that the modes are classifications of attitudes, behaviors, or motivations. So a person in the mode of goodness will have a certain attitude, a certain behavior, and certain kinds of motivations. A person in the mode of passion or ignorance will have different attitudes, different behaviors, and different motivations. And again, they are classifications of psychological attributes or qualities. If we meet a person in the mode of goodness, they will come across to us in one way. If we meet a person in the mode of passion, they will strike us in a completely different way. And if we meet a person in the mode of ignorance, they will interact with us in yet a completely different way. So these psychological attributes we experience from our interaction with other people is also classified and separated by the modes, depending on what mode the person we're associating with, what mode they're operating in. The modes are also classifications of emotional attributes. Someone in one kind of mood or spirit, for the most part, they are said to be in the mode of goodness. A person in a different mood or spirit is said to be in a different mode. And the modes are also classifications of environments. So what we've been talking about so far are internal modes. Attitudes, behaviors, and motivations are internal. Psychological attributes are internal. Emotional attributes are internal. But now we're talking about the external world. So environments, they are external. A certain environment can be said to be in the mode of passion or the mode of goodness or the mode of ignorance. Certain environments are of their very nature primarily the output or primarily the thing that causes those who come into that environment to change towards that environmental mode. So if you enter a forest, which is in the mode of goodness, or you enter a temple, which is could be in the mode of goodness, it could be also in the mode of pure goodness, you will be in one mode. You will be blown in the direction of the mode of goodness. If you enter a gambling casino, or you enter a uh, a stock exchange, that will blow your mind heavily into the mode of passion direction. And if you enter someplace in the mode of ignorance, like say a brothel or a bar or something like that, then that will blow your mind into the ignorant direction. So these environments, they have a gravitational effect on us, like again, winds blowing us in different directions. Also, the modes are sometimes classifications of activities, manners, or methods. So a person in the mode of goodness will do something in a particular way, and a person in the mode of passion will do something in a different way, and a person in the mode of ignorance will do something in yet another way. And sometimes we see that certain objects lend themselves quite well to particular modes. Many objects are more or less neutral, but some objects are particularly associated with various modes. Like, for instance, intoxication is in the mode of ignorance. So uh, in the usual way people interact with intoxicants, it puts them in the mode of ignorance. So therefore, these objects are associated with the mode of ignorance. They are considered to be tools of the mode of ignorance. All right, so we want to know, how do we enter into the mode of goodness? And the first thing that we can say is we have to engage in service. If we're doing service, we will be doing things without personal motivations. That's what we mean by service. Here we mean service in the devotional service context. If we are serving the deity, serving the devotee, serving the temple, serving in a Sankirtan effort or something like that, then we are automatically now engaged in the mode of goodness or the mode of pure goodness. And therefore, uh, like a submarine, we are going upward toward the surface. We're not going downward, and we're not staying the same. We are gradually rising in the modes. Now, we also have to give up material desire. The more material desires we have, the more we will run after them. And running after material desires is the definition of the mode of passion. So if we run after material desires, we will not be going upward. We will gradually be going downward. And usually the mode of passion means that we will be up and down and up and down and up and down. And that's a characteristic of the mode of passion. Therefore, we must avoid circumstances that bring out the wrong modes in us, if possible. Sometimes it's not possible, but external environments that are deep in the mode of ignorance or passion, we should, as much as possible, try to avoid them. And of course, we must chant Hare Krishna. If we do these things, we will have a reservoir or a working potential within our consciousness of the mode of goodness. We will not be tending towards the mode of passion and ignorance. And even if we have to go through an environment which is mostly in the mode of ignorance or passion, it won't tend to affect us very much. If we're very weak in our mode of goodness, then the external environment may turn us around completely. And that's why the process of Krishna consciousness gradually pulls us more and more fully into the mode of goodness. So in Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 14, in chapter 17, and chapter 18, the modes of goodness, I mean, the modes of nature are fully described. And as far as I know, I don't know any other place in Vedic literature where we get as a complete description of the modes as we do in Bhagavad Gita. So between chapter 14, chapter 17, and chapter 18, lots of things are described about the mode, but particularly we want to know about the mode of goodness. So here are some of the things that are described. We just read that the mode of goodness is illuminating, it frees from sinful reactions, and those in that mode become conditioned by happiness and knowledge. We just read that. So the qualities of the modes of goodness are that it's illuminating, sinful reaction freeing, persons are happy and knowledgeable. This is the nature of the mode of goodness, as Prabhupada said. The mode of goodness increases happiness and increases knowledge, and it decreases sin. So whenever you decrease sin, you're automatically going to be happier. And since the mode of goodness is illuminating, you're also going to be more knowledgeable, and therefore you are going to be happier. The mode of goodness takes work. It cannot be done accidentally, and it cannot be done in a absent-minded way. One has to work at the mode of goodness. And Prabhupada gives us a little bit of a warning that the mode of goodness tends to condition a person to happiness, which means, as he said, that a person in the mode of goodness, instead of wanting to get out of the material world altogether, which is the real goal of life, such a person will be happy enough just remaining in the mode of goodness, which is a third class or fourth class solution. Because ultimately, even if you're in the mode of goodness, you still have to suffer. Later on in the Bhagavad Gita, we'll find that in the mode of goodness, all the gates are illuminated by knowledge, that your death destination is the higher planets if you're in the mode of goodness. The result of being consistently in the mode of goodness is you will purify yourself. The result of being in the mode of goodness consistently is that you will tend to perform pious action. From the mode of goodness, real knowledge develops, and you progress upward towards the heavenly planets. And those in the mode of goodness worship demigods. So the mode of goodness is in the right direction. We often, as devotees, talk about the mode of pure goodness, which is what devotees are in. They are attempting to bypass all of this, and they don't want to go to heaven. They don't want to be materially happy. They don't want to, worship demigods. They want to be with the Supreme Lord. So this is called the mode of pure goodness. All right, so that took longer than I thought it was going to take. So let me open the door for questions here. If any of our members here have any questions about any of that we discussed about the three modes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So now we can open the forum for discussion.
I see something on the chat. Is it a question? Oh, somebody's asking me where this lecture will be available. Now I have to be honest and ashamed at the same time. I am recording it, and I have been putting them on my YouTube channel, which is Forest Dwellers, one word, space 108. So if you go to YouTube and in the search bar, you type Forest Dwellers, and then you leave a space and you type 108, it should go right to my channel. If you type any other way. If you type forest dwellers as 2 words, you'll start looking at natives in Africa and South America and that kind of stuff. You don't want to do that. So that's the way. But I have been snowed under by so many things that I'm recording these kind of almost in a sense of for posterity, but it takes me a while to post edit them because I put them in a certain format. But anyway, that's where they will be. So you can check what I already have up there because there's a lot of videos up there already. But hopefully I'll have some time in the near future to put these others up, the newer ones.
Raj, is pure goodness the same thing as Brahman?
Something like that. Yeah, it's close to being the same thing as Brahman. Actually, I could say they're almost equivalent. The only difference between goodness and pure goodness really is that regular goodness is tainted. Prabhupada uses that word, that it's not truly full goodness. It's got a slant to it. It's got somewhat of a color to it. And that's why the mode of goodness is the best of the modes. But we actually, through devotional service, want to go beyond it to the mode of pure goodness, which involves eliminating all elements of any of the modes, goodness, passion, or ignorance, and just being in full goodness.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
I was wondering about deity worship. You know, those who, not deity worship, I'm sorry, worship of the demigods.
Uh-huh.
I would have thought that there would have been a kind of heavy influence of passion in that one, since normally people who worship demigods, they're in it for something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I would respond to that just like sometimes the modes of nature are described the way colors are in the spectrum. If you have any ideas of how to mix colors, you take red, you take green, and you take blue. At least that's the way LED screens work on computers. You take those 3 colors and you mix them together. So if something is full red, we could say it's the mode of passion. If something's full green, we could say it's the mode of goodness. Or if something's full blue, we could say it's the mode of ignorance. But if something's white, that means it's got an equal proportion of all 3 modes, absolutely equal proportion. However, if you just dip down a few percentage points on one of those 3 colors, then suddenly you have a color like what we call cream or off-white or light tan or a reddish white. You know, we get these kind of colors. And this is the nature of the mode of goodness. It's tinged by one. And as you say, the demigod worshiper is in the mode of goodness because they're worshiping the demigods, but it's tinged with passion. That's where the passion tinge comes from, that they still want something. They're going about it in probably the best way a materialist could go about it, you know, rather than beating people over the head and taking stuff from them. They are praying to demigods for particular material benedictions. It's still material, but it's, you know, certainly not got the karmic ramifications of some of the other ways that people get material objects.
Mm-hmm. So maybe if I could get a little more clarity on the nature of the mode of passion. So it's characterized by like a very fervent, would you say it's characterized by a fervent drive to accomplish something?
Yeah,
Or but then there is also So it's, but I mean, it seems like there's multiple. There's a fervent drive to accomplish something. There's a desire to gratify one's senses. But in the mode of goodness, I guess I need to contrast them a little bit more. In the mode of goodness, could a person be very zealous about trying to achieve something? But I guess maybe the difference is that a person in the mode of goodness, they could be zealous for something, but it wouldn't be for the sake of their sense gratification. People in the mode of goodness, I guess they're not so, they don't have much inclination for sense gratification, is it?
Yeah.
Is that the idea?
Well, a person in the mode of goodness, not pure goodness, but regular goodness, such a person is motivated for sense gratification, but their sense gratification is of a less self-destructive sort, so they are motivated, but it's of a less destructive sort. Only those who are motivated for pure goodness, devotees, have no tendency towards any kind of real material benediction. They want simply to serve Krishna. So there's no motivation whatsoever there. Their desires are fully spiritual. Everybody has to have desires. And when a person is working very ardently, like devotees do sometimes, to please Krishna, it may look externally like the mode of passion, because people who are in the passionate mode, they're working very hard for some material goal. A person in devotional service is also working hard, but their goal is to please Krishna. The difference is that a person working for a material goal is truly in the mode of passion. The person working hard for Krishna is expressing what we call utsaha, or enthusiasm for Krishna, because they are not reaping the fruit of the thing that they're doing for Krishna. They're doing it for Krishna. That's the difference. So if a person does something with the view to enjoy the fruit later, that's certainly the mode of passion. If someone does something with the view to give the result to Krishna, that's not passion, that's devotional service, and that's labeled as utsaha. Externally, the two may seem quite similar to a person who doesn't know anything about spiritual life or Vedic knowledge. They would appear exactly similar, but there's a wealth of difference between them, and the Vedas make a point of it.
And of course, the enthusiastic worker for Krishna is not goodness, but pure goodness.
Yeah, right.
And you also said that the person working in the mode of passion has a destructive, I guess, flavor to it. But for one thing, I would normally associate the destructive tinge with the mode of ignorance. If a person who is passionate, let's say in the, working in the stock market, or who, or who is in, being competitive in the Olympics, people who have that kind of passion, that it doesn't sound like it has a destructive bent to it.
Until you look very closely at the lives of people who are doing those things. That's the interesting thing about it. Every form of passionate endeavor towards some material goal or aim is self-destructive. Some are quite obviously self-destructive, whereas others are a little more subtly self-destructive. But that's the very nature of clawing your way to the top in some kind of material pursuit. If you want fame, you've got to claw your way to the top. If you want money, you've got to claw your way to the top. If you want to have many sex partners, you've got to claw your way through a lot of difficult situations. If you want to be very knowledgeable and be able to be recognized for that, you've got to claw your way to the top. So this is the story that you see over and over and over in our material world. Nobody cottons on to this, that we think there is a great, rock candy mountain, some big lollipop in the sky. We want to go for it. We hear about it. We work for it in a material way. And two things happen. We get it or we don't get it. So those people who don't get the lollipop in the sky, they lament that somehow or other fate was frowned on them and they couldn't get what they wanted. However, worse is those who actually do get the lollipop because they realize that it's just a painted piece of glass and has no flavor. And that bewilders people. I think it's even more bewildering than not being able to attain your material goal. But everybody falls into one of those two categories, either getting their goal or not getting their goal. In fact, um, Oscar Wilde made the statement at one point, I guess in one of his books, or maybe it was offhand to someone who was talking with him, that there are two great tragedies in life, and one of them is not getting what you desperately want in life, and the other is getting what you desperately want in life. So, as they say, you're screwed either way. You know, you can't enjoy in the material world.
So is
And
that what
that's
you're
why
calling
we,
self-destructive?
what's that?
This,
Yeah, right. The nature of running towards material goals is that, first of all, you can't attain them easily. So you tend to pull out all the stops to try to maximize your ability to gain what you're really running after. And as you do, you lower yourself and your standards to more and more drastic and you know destructive methods to get what you want. And you usually find that you have to, as you go and enjoy the various easy to get material enjoyments, they don't do that much for you after a while. You find the eternal smoking more and enjoying it less principle. And as you do that, then you switch your material desires gradually to baser and more extreme forms of sinful type of enjoyment. And this is why people go down the tubes. There's no staying even once you're chasing material desire. You're not going to come to a good goal. You're not going to come to a good end. You're gradually going down. How quick you go down depends on how quick it is till you get to one of the big four things that bottoms you out right away. You know, meat eating, intoxication, illicit sex, and gambling. Once you get heavy into any one of those four, then it's all over fast. You know, but the other things are a little more mode of goodnessy, and you may not go down at quite such a steep trajectory.
Maharaj, we have a question from Saroj Mehta.
Okay.
Yes, Prabhu, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Swamiji, for enlightening this talk. But I just have a quick question. I know it's been mainly discussed. How do we step up from mode of goodness to a higher level? What is the best way to do that? To move to it?
Yes, and Hare Krishna.
Because we are on a family life, we have a lot
Yeah, the best way is to
responsibilities.
chant Hare Krishna very, very carefully. That's the simplest, easiest, cost-effective way, and it will solve all problems. The problem is we don't do it. We can't take it serious. And when we chant, we space out. You know,
Mhm.
Lord Chaitanya said, Nam Nam Akari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatarpita Niyamita Smaranina Kala Eta Drushi Tavakrika Bhagavan Namapi Durdaiva Midrishami Hajani Nanuraga. Your holy name is so nice. You have made it available. It is not difficult to do. There's no time or place where you have to do it. But I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for it. So that's the problem with the holy name. But it's the only and easiest way to go from the mode of goodness to the mode of pure goodness. Of course, coupled with a life of service, it has a greater chance to deliver you quickly.
Hare Krishna, we can now I'll
Hare
ask
Krishna Maharaj.
Lavanya Mataji to ask a question.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, so bhakti is in the mode of pure goodness, right?
Actually, no. In the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it explains that, yes, the act of devotional service is always pure, but the person performing the devotional service themselves may be tinged themselves with passionate or ignorant goals, methods, or a mentality in performing that devotional service. So you can perform devotional service, which is always purifying, and will, even if it's performed incorrectly, gradually purify you. However, if we recognize that we can be performing devotional service with ulterior motivations, we will work to remove those ulterior motivations, and our devotional service will be much more efficacious. It'll work much better.
Yes, Maharaj. Okay, so then in this material world, uh, since we are always attached to matter and we are conditioned, so we will have that passion and ignorance which we won't be able to get rid of. So is there any, by chanting and performing devotional service, is there any other way, like it can be Shuddha, bhakti or goodness without passion and ignorance?
Yeah, it's just described in the Harinam Chintamani that we have to go from, Namaparad to Namabhas to Shuddhanam. It's just the process, We are performing bhakti, but we are performing what is called Mishra Bhakti. It's either Karma
Yeah.
Mishra, Jnana Mishra, or Yoga Mishra Bhakti. So we're performing mixed devotional service, but that's all we can do. We can't jump immediately to the purified level. Of course, some do, but it's rare that somebody does that. Therefore, we have to continue in our mixed devotional service, understanding that it's mixed and understanding in what way we're mixing it and trying to turn off the mixture and make it pure, because the quicker we can get to performing devotional service purely, the better it will work. And of course, chanting the holy name carefully is the easiest way to become internally unattached to those things which cause us to mix passion, ignorance with our devotional service. We're mixing passion and ignorance because we're attracted to certain material things. And if we chant the holy name very nicely, that's the quickest way that we ourselves will come to not be interested in those things which right now dazzle and attract us. That's what pulls our devotional service off course. We know it does, we feel it does, we don't want it to, but it still has an effect on us. So by chanting the holy name carefully, eventually we won't have that wind pushing us so strongly. As it dies off, we will find that there's nothing left but just a desire for devotional service. And that's the way it's supposed to work. We move from Karma Mishra Bhakti to Shuddha Bhakti. So we move from Nam Aparad to Nam Abbas to Shuddha Nam. So those things are there. It's a process of going from a tainted version to a purified version.
Thank you, Maharaj. And the last one, Maharaj. So even if it's Mishra Bhakti, does Krishna accepts it?
Sure.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Maharaj.
he accepts it. But Krishna also understands your degree of commitment. You know, if you're very uncommitted, your progress in devotional service will be slow. But if your progress in devotion, if your commitment is high, you can jump up literally in moments. You know, we were just discussing that whole story of, Gokarna and his brother, you know, that they were listening to Bhagavatam, and Gokarna's brother, who was actually the sinful wretch, he immediately went and was delivered, whereas the other people listening weren't, and they weren't sinful. But it was because his sinful brother was actually had a motivation to be focused. So it's this lack of focus that keeps us from getting anywhere.
Yeah.
And we just have to constantly fight it, that's all. And eventually the focus will come more naturally, and our material desires will lessen, will become less sinful, will be less tending towards material things, and therefore our passion and ignorance will start to diminish, and we'll head towards pure white devotional service, which is not tinged a little bit with a little bit of red or a little bit of green or a little bit of blue.
Thank you, Maharaj, so much. Beautifully explained, Maharaj. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat.
Hare Krishna. At this point, I would like to ask if there are any further questions, maybe for one more minute. And I would like to inform you that next week we have His Holiness Devamrit Swami Maharaj giving the class from New Zealand at the same time. So look forward to welcome you next week. So if you don't have any further questions, we can end the session at this point. And if Maharaj wants to make any announcement,
Then please just chant Hare Krishna. Tomorrow I'm on at the Bhakti Center, so I'm giving they do 7:15 to 8 o'clock there. So I'm speaking again. If you're on my WhatsApp group, you'll have all the details for it. And as we were hearing that, although I won't be able to put it up on my web channel, we find that the Radha Govinda Mandir devotees will put it up on their, is it YouTube, or are you going to put it up on Facebook?
ISKCON New York TV, the YouTube channel. ISKCON NYC TV.
Right. So this lecture will be available, the version of it that is being recorded right now. So my version of it may not be available for a while, but the other version of it that Radha Govinda Mandir also is taping will be available. Okay, so thank you all very much. I appreciate that you took time out of your life to try to hear something, and I'm trying to turn over the nectar of various aspects of Krishna consciousness, and doing my best, although it's sometimes much more could be desired. So all glories to Srimad Bhagavad Gita, all glories to the Vaishnava devotees. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj, for your wonderful lecture. And thank you, devotees, for joining us in the virtual Sunday Feast lecture. So meet you next week with His Holiness Devamrit Swami Maharaj joining us from New Zealand. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.